I was focusing more so on a different aspect. I think on the website, there was a mention of bridging access for patients, and I really wanted to talk a lot about advocacy and bridging. And I started thinking about bridges, the purpose, and how do we get from point A to point B? So a bridge is always meant to get us from one destination to another, usually over a particular area that may be impossible or very difficult to cross. So you're given a pathway to get over that or to have to avoid going around it. So I was thinking about different kinds of bridges. And we think about like just your typical bridge that goes across. Usually we're thinking about over water, which may be turbulent. It can be high. Things that you have to overcome that you may not be able to do just ordinarily. So I thought about going from diagnosis to destiny. So how do you get across? You don't do it by yourself, for sure. But regardless of what's going on underneath, whatever else is going on, you have a pathway to get over this condition, this diagnosis. You're more than what the doctor has said you have. I thought about like a covered bridge, which of course there's something going on underneath, but there's also protection over you as well. So you're being protected from the top and the bottom, and this all has everything to do with building out our support teams. What Nerfunda and Team WIP is doing, what the Gene Machine is doing, is making connections to get you from one place to the next place. In things that would be impossible for us as individuals, this is a very personal diagnosis, but you can't do it alone. And it's not to be done in isolation. You need every single person in a group. We need, when they used to say the African village, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village, a community, a nation to help survivors. And then you are encouraging each other. Now, one of the prophets, and I can't remember now who it was, said sometimes you have to encourage yourself. Yes, you do have to remain strong and steadfast in your faith and in fortitude. You got to be strong and fight this thing, but knowing that there are other people that are also advocating for you. And I cannot emphasize enough how priceless this organization is in terms of connecting survivors with resources, with other survivors, with healthcare providers who can give you information, with genetics counselors. I'm so grateful for Morgan and people like her, because while I may understand some of the genetics, it's not always easy to explain that to a patient. So to have someone who has actually devoted their entire study in their lives to being able to explain to patients what your risks are, what your next move should possibly be, and to kind of untangle all of the chaos that can be just embedded in a diagnosis. So I'm just super excited about what's available to all of you, because it wasn't always this way. I thought about a couple other bridges, and then I'm going to move on into maybe some more kind of scientific things. But a suspension bridge, like you're being held up by all of these strings where it looks like it shouldn't hold, but you're stronger than what you think. All of those little wires that are holding you up, that's your community. That's somebody giving you rides to the doctor. That's somebody giving you your medication. That's the phone calls saying, hey, I'm praying for you. That's the meal train. That's we're bringing over foods. All of those things make a difference in getting you from diagnosis to destiny. And then I was like, there's another bridge. And I asked my husband, I was like, give me a bridge. And he was like, a drawbridge. And I was like, ooh, I never thought of a drawbridge. Because that thing goes up and down. Sometimes it's up, and you gotta wait until something passes by before you can get through, and then it's let down and you can go across. So just know that your journey is dynamic. It's not necessarily always gonna be smooth, it's not always gonna be just go straight across. There are gonna be some ups and some downs. Sometimes you have to let things pass. Sometimes you gotta wait until they pass, but then be ready to pick up at the next moment to get where you are supposed to go. So I think Morgan did a great job with the statistics. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer during their lifetime. I wasn't sure how the seating arrangement was going to be, but I was going to say we could count off and then one person out of every 8 would stand. Now, I think, of course, the statistics are higher in this room because we're speaking to a very curated group here. But if you think about it, we all know 7 other women. We either have 7 other women in our family, in our friend groups, in our jobs. If you don't know any of the 7 that have cancer, it could be you. That's how prevalent it is. And with that comes the responsibility of knowing, as Nafanda said, you have to know who you are, knowing your history, your family history, knowing your risk factors. And there's some things that we don't like to talk about necessarily, myself included, but certain things that we can do to kind of help mitigate those risks of breast cancer. Now, there's absolutely nothing that can 100% prevent you from having breast cancer. There's some things that we can work on, and Morgan touched on some of those things. Guilty of exercise and being overweight. We don't want to do those things because we like to eat the stuff that we like to eat that makes us feel good. And then we get that perimenopausal and menopausal little pouch. Those are risks, but those are modifiable risks. And, a lot of times I think patients think, or we think like, oh, they pick it on me because I'm a little thicker. No, there's some biology behind that as to why it's important to maintain a healthy weight and to maintain a healthy diet, less fat, those things. What we don't necessarily realize is that fat changes one of the enzymes, aromatase, into estrogen. We know that a lot of the breast cancers are estrogen sensitive, and so that's why we end up with medicines that decrease your estrogen stores. So we get all of this love extra in the middle of that little fat kind of going on, and we get some of those tissues that are changing an enzyme into estrogen, feeding or potentially raising the risk of cancers. So decreasing like a lot of the red meats that we eat, alcohol, engaging in moderate exercise, about 150 minutes a week is what they said, but they even said 300 minutes a week, so about an hour every day even decreases your risk even more. And like I said, I know that's stuff that we don't want to talk about, but I myself am guilty of not doing those things. Of course, doing your self-breast exams, and anybody that has come to see me as a patient, during your annual exam, we do your breast exam. I'm going to ask you, do you know how to check your breast? Are you doing your breast exams? And sometimes I get them. And then I was like, okay, well, I said, but next year we're going to do better, right? And then they'll promise, and then someone will come back, and then next year they're like, I ain't gonna lie to you, stuff like that. But it's awareness, and some patients will say, well, I don't know if I'm doing it right and stuff. And we go over the steps. I said, but the more important thing is breast awareness. Once you are familiar with what your breasts feel like, then you know if there are any changes. And don't, minimize if you're having a problem. Like, oh, well, there's a little ache, because we've talked about at different events, it's I won't say it's a lie, but it's misguided that breast cancer doesn't hurt, because it certainly can. You know, typically the way the symptoms have been described is like, oh, it's painless and you'll feel a mass. Well, sometimes by the time you feel a mass, it has actually, it's progressed significantly. So if you're having pain, or if you feel anything like a tightness, numbness, anything that feels off to you that seems to persist, go and get it checked out. We'd rather do ultrasounds and mammograms and do whatever we need to do to check to make sure that there is no evidence of disease, rather than to kind of write it off and say, oh, it's fine, and there'll be a problem. Because we can't emphasize enough early detection, early cure. The earlier you are diagnosed, like I said, there's no 100% preventative measure that you can take to avoid getting breast cancer, but the earlier you are diagnosed, the better your prognosis, which the prognosis is actually amazing for early stage breast cancer. The 5-year survival rate is between 95 and 99%. That's incredible. Now, I won't go necessarily into the specifics of the different types of breast cancer and then the staging and what it means for prognosis, but that should be really encouraging if you find a cancer early, and a lot of that is because of screening. So regular screening, getting your mammograms, doing your self-breast exams. Also, just let me throw this in here, don't let fear undermine your health. There are some people out there who either have had a diagnosis or have a very close relative with a diagnosis, and they won't go get checked. They're like, I'm scared. And so I'm more afraid for you of what could happen to you as opposed to what your diagnosis could be. Because if it's early, it's a good prognosis. There is help, there are treatments available. Hopefully there's nothing, but don't let the fear of what could be keep you from getting the help that you need. Because there's a big difference between a stage 1 and a stage 3, whether you need adjuvant therapy with like chemotherapy and radiation, the different surgeries, all of those things. Your stage, or the detection, the stage at which you're diagnosed, makes a difference in how you are treated. We make distinctions, of course, between whether or not your breast cancer is hormone receptor positive versus negative. It's helpful if it's hormone receptor positive, because we have medicines that can fight against the hormone. So we can decrease the amount of estrogen. We give you medicines that can kind of fight against the progesterones. Some of the more difficult ones are the triple negative, because they don't necessarily respond to those hormonal medicines because they're not hormonally driven. But even in the midst of all of that, the earlier we can detect or diagnose, the earlier we can get a treatment plan in place and also begins to work towards a cure. That's always our goal. There was a sheet in the packet about decreasing cancer risk or helping with cancer prevention. And I was like, this is so good. And you'll see this kind of all the time. Cancer is that, of course, we all have an inherent risk. You know, when we're born, there's some risk of cancer, but we're so wonderfully made that God put in stops. Like some of those cells that are abnormal will basically kill themselves. Now, when they don't get the code to stop proliferating, that's when cancer can occur. Some call apoptosis. So if there's mutations in certain genes that don't allow for those cells to control or regulate themselves, then you can get cancer. Alcohol can change some of those cells and how they function, those genes and how they function. We've already talked about eating healthy and maintaining a healthy weight and being active. We talked about knowing your family medical and cancer history, wearing sunscreen, and seek shade. When Morgan mentioned about getting a dermatologist because of the risk of melanoma with certain cancers, it's all kind of intertwined. You know, if you're diagnosed with cancer or you're at risk for cancer, then certainly your risk for certain other things are higher. And so now this one, for me, get the HPV or human papilloma virus vaccination. This kind of hits back for me being a gynecologist. He's looking like, what in the world is this? Well, this is important because human papilloma virus is the virus that causes cervical cancer. There's over 100 different subtypes, and it pretty much exclusively causes cervical cancer. In terms of, if you have a cervical cancer, it's not likely that it's from anything other than HPV, which we don't usually have like the one thing that causes a cancer. And it also has implications for men as well, because it can cause anal and penile cancers as well. So HPV as a known cancer causing agent, the vaccination is helpful. Now, when the vaccine came out with 4, it's a quadrivalent vaccination that covers types 6 and 11, which are known to cause genital warts. And then 16 and 18 are known to cause at least about 50% of the abnormal pap smears that you see. Now, for anyone that's had an abnormal pap smear, you do not have cancer. We do the typing, but the reason why we follow you more closely, or we do colposcopy, we do biopsies, those things like that, we do not want you to progress to a cervical cancer. That's a slow growing, slow progressing cancer. So we're able to get in there and check, keep a close eye on you, and your body should be able to clear the effects of those abnormal cells. But the vaccine, because we have a few younger ladies in here, initially when the recommendations came out, it was for girls and boys between the ages of 9 and 12, because you wanted them to never ever have seen HPV. It's pretty much exclusively sexually transmitted. We don't look at it as like sexually transmitted infection, but that is the way it is transmitted. So exposure is overwhelming. We think as much as 80% of the population has been exposed to HPV at some times. But again, your body has the ability to clear the effects of those abnormal cells, when we're talking about like your body having just kind of these inherent reparative type mechanisms in place. Your body can clear it. We won't say it gets rid of it, but it usually, people don't go on to develop cervical cancer. The reason I mention this is that now it's recommended that up to age 45, and I know I've got some ladies in here who are under the age of 45, that for HPV, yes ma'am, you can still get the HPV vaccine even if you've had an abnormal pap, even if you have had the high-risk HPV, and it only covers a couple of types, but you may have been exposed to a different type and it still may confer some protection or immunity for you with that. That was an aside, but I did like this tower of information and ways that you can kind of help prevent cancer. Like I said, I was just wanting to be more conversational and just making sure that everybody is intentional about not doing this alone. And it's very interesting that you can know people, you can live with people that have a diagnosis, and you still don't know what, because I can only empathize and try to support, but I don't know the path that you walk because I haven't had a diagnosis.